Welcome to Chasing Prophecy Radio, where we discuss the unidentified, the unexplainable, paranormal, conspiracies, and much more. Starring your host and co-host, Jenny Nicasio, Sean Kelly, and Jason Sledgehammer I. Petro. Brought to you by UPRN Network. Now for your host, Jenny Nicasio.
Good evening and welcome to Chasing Prophecy on FM 107.7 New Orleans, where we discuss anything and everything beyond the scope of normal. Remember to like us on YouTube and follow us on Instagram. I'm Jenny Nicasio along with Shen Kelly, Jason I. and Petro. Happy Thursday, everyone.
Happy Thursday.
Sorry, we're a little late this evening. We're having a little technical difficulties, but that's cool. Everything's fine now. But tonight, this evening, we have Stan Gordon back in the house. Stan Gordon has been researching UFOs, sightings, Bigfoot encounters, and other mysterious events in Pennsylvania since 1959. Since then, he has been involved with investigations of thousands of unusual incidents. He is the primary investigator of the 1965 UFO crash incidents that occurred near Kecksburg, PA. And Stan has been busy lately researching some interesting things. So that's why we have him on the show. Unfortunately, the Kecksburg Festival was canceled due to COVID. I don't know why now, because we don't need our masks anymore. Well, that's a good thing for some people and others not so good. But without further ado, let's welcome back to Chasing Prophecy, Stan Gordon. Thanks for joining us tonight, Stan.
Thanks, Jenny, for having me back on the program.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm so happy we could do this. So, Stan, we were discussing over the phone some of the things that have happened. Can you tell our audience tonight, and Jason and Sean, what's been going on?
Well, as you know, I receive UFO sighting reports and other reports of other phenomena every year, all year round. But interestingly, this past February through most of March, we had a very interesting wave of UFO activity here in the greater Pittsburgh area and other parts of the state, but mainly here in western PA. And it went on for weeks. I'm still getting reports in, but the main activity seemed to end somewhere in late March. And I actually read up a report on it, but to give you a little bit of idea what happened. In early March, there were 3 white circle lights in a triangular formation reported from Cambria County. The objects were observed for a few minutes and they suddenly vanished. There have been reports of triangular-shaped objects in various locations. There was a daylight observation of a large black rectangular object reported from Bedford County. There have been reports of large glowing spherical objects seen at low level and close to homes. There have been bright objects moving straight up to the sky and disappearing. There have been sightings of small spheres of light that are close to the ground, and there continue to be reported. And residents from different areas are reporting unusual luminous objects being recorded on their game and security cameras. And I've been in touch with various other researchers about this as well, and some of them were also receiving reports. One of them was Dan Hagman up at the BORU, the Butler Organization for Research the Unexplained. And
did we lose him? Oh, man. I think we lost him.
Well, give him a call back.
Oh.
Boy, the electronic gremlins are strong.
This is
tonight.
one night.
Yes, they
I
are.
swear to God, this is just not.
Is it a full moon tonight or something? Jeez.
I don't know.
There's a new moon coming in that's supposed to make everything good and happy,
Let me
from
try
what
to
I've been
call him
reading.
back.
Well, you got to take the bad with the good, right?
We have to
Yeah.
call. I have to see. I can't get on my email right now, so I can't email him.
You might be calling him too fast. Give it a sec. He might be trying to call you back too. At the
Yeah,
same time.
probably. It's There we go.
I'm back.
Oh, I'm sorry about
Hey,
that.
welcome back.
But let's do that again. Okay, so go ahead. Continue where you left off if you can remember. You said about the lights shooting up.
Okay, I only have 4 back to where. Okay. Well, going back into the report again, I'm not sure exactly where we left off, but there were reports of bright lights seen at low level close to homes, bright objects moving straight up to the night sky and disappearing. There were sightings of small spheres of light close to the ground, and residents from different areas were reporting unusual luminous objects that were recorded on their game and security cameras. And I was in touch with various other researchers, and they were also getting reports. One of them was Dan Hagman up at the Butler Organization for Research the Unexplained, and he had some very interesting cases. Here's some of the reports that Dan forwarded to me. He said on March 2nd, a witness reported seeing 3 shiny silver spheres moving west-east in a straight line. They looked shiny, silver in color, and glowing. They looked equally spaced, were moving very fast. On March 8th, a witness observed a shiny, bright, cigar-shaped object in the morning sky. The sky was generally clear with some fluffy clouds. The object did not appear to have any wings or tail. The object was so bright he had to squint his eyes to view it. And the witness, who was very familiar with aircraft, stopped his vehicle and got out to get a better look at this object that moved into a cloud but never exited from it. And by the way, that is very similar to numerous reports I've had for the last few years, even in daylight, where these objects enter clouds and the objects never exit from the clouds. On March 11th, Dan had a very interesting report from, again, Butler County. The man was in his kitchen, and he began to feel this strange vibration and heard this low rumble, and he realized that the sliding glass door to his deck was vibrating, and he looked out the door, and he noticed this bright, very large, pulsating red object just above the trees at the edge of his yard. And the light of the object illuminated the backyard as though it was the middle of the day. He stepped out on that deck and was awestruck by what he saw. He felt a tingling sensation. His ears stood up. He had chill bumps on his body. He called his wife and he ran inside to get a camera, but when he came back, the object was gone. And, this is just an example of some of the reports that have been going on. So it's been very, very interesting, and so we're continuing to receive some older reports as well.
Wow.
Can you ask Stan if anything interesting is happening up in Armstrong County?
Stan, did you hear that?
Armstrong County is an area where there's always a lot of activity. And I can tell you in the last few years, there have been some very interesting cases up there. And historically, some of the really strange cryptid cases we've had, and even UFO cases have happened around Butler County and Armstrong County. And so there's a lot of interesting, very, very odd phenomena that have taken place in the last few years. It's not just the UFO sightings and just the Bigfoot reports, but starting back in 2017, we began to receive some very odd series of reports of something, not a Bigfoot, something actually kind of much stranger, and people describe this thing as looking more like some type of a very thin, skeletal thin creature, completely hairless, and about 6 to 7 foot tall. And the first report I got actually was from here in Western Pennsylvania from a police officer who was on patrol, and he observed this ball of light in an area. It was on the ground, and he observed this ball of light that he had never seen artificial light in that area. So he stopped his patrol car, and as he's sitting there, this ball of light suddenly rises up from the ground. And he realizes that this is actually the head of this very thin humanoid being that's skeletal thin. And he said his indication was that this thing actually been lying on the ground with the head facing the road when he first saw it. Now it's dark out, of course. And then it stood up, and he could see this dull light from the glowing head illuminating the upper part of the body. And he said this thing moved faster than anything he'd ever seen move in his life. It was here and it was gone, which is a very interesting statement to make because other people have been describing the same thing to me. He said the thing was 6 feet or taller, head was 8 to 10 inches in diameter, shaped like a ball, but may have been somewhat egg-shaped. The illumination lit up the shoulders, the top of the chest, the sections of the arms. He could not see the hands. The chest looked about 18 inches across. The waist appeared to be small. The arms were unusually long. The long limbs looked skeletal with no muscle mass, and the skin of the body tone appeared to be kind of a dull grayish blue. He only saw this thing for several seconds, but he got a very good look at it. But the reason I bring this up is because there were other reports within weeks and months after that initial report. And one of the reports was from Armstrong County. And So again, there's been many reports around it, but this is interesting because this fellow lives in a very rural, wooded area. Basically, lives in the woods. He knows the animals very well. He knows what deer sound like. He sees them all the time. And that particular evening, he heard something bipedal walking up the woods, which didn't sound right to him. And he felt a little uneasy and decided to go down to his house. So he went back down to his home. He's sitting there in the kitchen at the dining room table, and he happens to look up. 10 feet away is this large back door that has no drapes on it. And here's this creature described very similar, that this thing's about 6 to 7 feet tall. It's completely crouched down on all fours. It's covered with all gray skin. It's completely hairless. The legs look like the back legs of a greyhound. The arms are longer than normal, bony and hairless. The head was round. The neck was small. The head appeared to be right on the shoulders. The mouth was closed, but it had glowing yellow eyes. And this thing was 10 feet away, staring right into his face. It went down on all fours and scampered around the house and was gone. But that's just an example of some of the weird things that's been going on around this area.
That's scary as hell.
Jeez.
They're almost the same. I mean, in the same area. They have none of them got any pictures, huh? Not even a audio.
No. It's just like in some of these cases. In a lot of these cases, the incident occurs for seconds, and the people are so shocked by what they saw. Even people who see various phenomena for a little longer time, they're so entranced by what they're seeing, lots of times they don't even think about taking a picture until afterwards. And that's not uncommon.
Wow. Let me ask you, these people, they see these images. Do they have any after effects of it? Like anything like a residual experience later?
You know, every case is different. With Bigfoot sightings, I investigated hundreds of them here in Pennsylvania, including many in the greater Pittsburgh area over many, many years. And a lot of these Bigfoot sightings that are going on are in daylight. You know, you watch a lot of these TV shows, you kind of get the impression you only see Bigfoot at night. Mm-hmm. We get many reports in daylight, and of UFOs as well and other phenomena. And each case is different. I've interviewed many hunters and outdoorsmen who have seen these creatures, and many of these guys spent years and years out in the woods, never saw a thing. They heard stories. Most of them didn't believe the reports. And a lot of these fellows I interviewed, I mean, their lives were completely changed because they encountered something that's not supposed to exist. Well, now they know that there's something out there they don't have an explanation for. And everybody's personality is different. Mm-hmm. Some people were very, very frightened. And some of these guys said, I'll never go back in the woods again. And other people wanted to go out and look for more evidence to prove what they saw because they told some friends and they were laughed at. And that's why even today, the majority of people that call in and report sightings, they want no publicity. So each case is different. But these incidents go on every year. We've had Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania year after year, including already this year we've had reports. January, early months in the wintertime this year, we had reports of large tracks in the snow. We did have a daytime Bigfoot sighting report up on the Chestnut Ridge, and I may have talked about that before. And the Chestnut Ridge is one of the most interesting areas in the country for phenomena. And the Chestnut Ridge runs through Westmoreland, Fayette, Indiana County here in southwest PA, and extends down to outside of Morgantown, West Virginia. But historically, for years and years, we received many reports of UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters and Thunderbird sightings and Black Panthers and weird creatures and mystery booms and underground sounds and all kind of paranormal phenomena goes on all along the ridge. And it's amazing what these people are reporting. And again, a lot of these reports come from different people in the public. Many of these people don't know each other. And it's just a very interesting area. And then something else I noticed years ago, you might recall if you were here back in the 1970s, but back in 1973, we had the largest UFO Bigfoot outbreak here in history in Pennsylvania. A lot of it in the greater Pittsburgh area. And this went on for months and months. And back then, as you recall, we had no cell phones and no internet. So actually, the local newspapers were covering these reports. So this was making a lot of both local and statewide, even national reports at times. So there was a lot of research being done. My teams were out there at the time. Luckily, the first of 3 volunteer research groups I had for many years was set up in 1970. That was the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group. And then we extended into Pittsburgh. And by 1973, we had extended to cover the whole state of Pennsylvania. And the group was kind of unique in that the majority of people involved were specialists. We had all types of scientists and engineers and technicians and police officers and former military people. A lot of people who volunteered their time. We all did this around our full-time jobs to investigate these reports. And we were very, very busy. And when this massive UFO Bigfoot wave occurred in 73, we were out there day and night with multitudes of cases going on. And that's when we began to receive some very strange reports that began to make us realize that there was a lot more to the Bigfoot phenomenon than any of us had ever imagined. And that's when we had some cases where you had UFOs and Bigfoot seen together at the same time and place.
Yeah, hey, Stan, those reports that you had recently, now, were they the same time as the lights in the sky, or were they a different time? The Bigfoot or the creatures that you mentioned, the gray creatures?
Okay, you're talking about the more recent reports?
Yes, the recent reports.
No, they were not. They were not associated, even though in the area, for example, up on the Chestnut Ridge, there's reports of strange things going on every year, including already this year. So not connected directly, but in that general area, we get reports. But in some of the historical cases we had, you had a UFO and a Bigfoot seen together. One of the most famous cases, and it's a long case, but just the brief part of the story, and some people have heard it, is pretty famous now. This was during that massive wave in 1973. It was October 25th. And about 10:30 that evening of 1973, I got a phone call from a state trooper from the Uniontown State Police Barracks. And he had just came back from investigating this incident, and he asked me if I could send up a team as soon as possible, that he thought there may be something still up on the farm where this had taken place. So we got our team together that night and got our equipment out there and headed up to Fayette County. But there was about 15 people that evening that observed this very large barn-sized red sphere about 100 feet off the ground and moving slowly downward. The short part of the story is this thing apparently landed in the field on the farmer's property. It was either right on the ground or right above it. And when three fellows, one of the older fellows and two young boys went up to the field to investigate, and they see this object on the ground, they're standing there in amazement because they can't believe it. But when they see it down on the ground, it's not a complete sphere now. It's a big white dome, like a half a sphere, bright white, illuminating the whole area, making this high-pitched sound. And as they're standing there watching it, their attention is drawn to a barbed wire fence about 75 feet away. Because along that barbed wire fence are these two tall creatures. One in front's about 8 feet tall. The one behind's about 7 feet tall. They're covered with long, dark, matted hair. The arms are so long and hanging down almost to the ground. They have no neck. They have luminous green eyes that are making these baby crying, whining sounds. And they're walking in their direction. Well, the one boy is so frightened, he runs out of there. And the other fellow yells to the older fellow with a rifle. He had a 30-06 with some ammunition with him, including 2 tracers. He didn't know he had that when he grabbed the ammunition. So you just get that luminous trail. A lot of the hunters out there are familiar with them. And he fired one tracer. There was no effect. But when he fired that second tracer, the largest of the 2 creatures makes this loud whining crying noise. It reaches out with its one hand as though to grab at that tracer, and the exact moment it does that, that object in the field physically disappears. It didn't rise off the ground. It just vanishes. The luminosity is gone, most of it. The loud whirling noise it was making is gone. And the creatures turn around, start walking back along the barbed wire fence towards the woods. Well, at that point, the fellow has live ammo now in his 30-06, and he starts firing at them, and he knows he hit them. He was aiming mainly at the large one, which he always told me till he passed away. He said, I'll never forget how that creature with those glowing green eyes that stared right in my face as I'm pumping live ammo into it. There's no effect on it whatsoever. And the 2 fellows, they run back to their truck and go back to the farmhouse, took the family out of there, took them to a neighbor's and called the state police. And when the trooper arrived 45 minutes later, they went up in the troop car, and the trooper told me, he said, the area where the object was on the ground was self-luminescent and glowing. about 100 feet or more in diameter. He said if you had a newspaper, you could have read the newspaper from the light coming out that glowing area. And the farm animals would not go into it. And then again, the short part of the story, this continued through the night, all kind of activity. I wrote this off my silent invasion book, the whole story, probably one of the weirdest cases ever documented. But anyhow, they took him back to the barracks, I was told. Both the trooper and the witness were separately taken to two separate rooms, separately interviewed. Then they called me to send up my team. But that was one of many, many cases that made us realize that we're dealing with a phenomenon here that's much stranger. And in the many years since then, even in very recent years, we have a lot of very, very strange cases now that suggest that Bigfoot is much more unusual than just an unknown type animal. And for lack of a better term, may indeed be interdimensional, which is why there's no bodies.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Jason?
Do you think that there's like a with Bigfoot, there's so many different sightings, it seems all over the place. Do you think there might be like a secret colony of Bigfoots that we just don't know about, like scattered throughout the United States kind of thing?
These sightings are reported throughout the United States, throughout Pennsylvania, year after year, and many parts of the world. And it's interesting. Bigfoot activity has been reported for so many years all across the country and around the world, and yet nobody's ever come up with a body. And it was one particular case that happened during the 73-74 outbreak of Pennsylvania, among others, that was the case that convinced myself and some of the skeptical research people on my team that we're dealing with something very, very strange. And if you want, I'll tell you some of that story as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is February 6, 1974. And I know looking at some of the faces there, you'll remember the time period. There was a big national trucker strike. There was gas rationing. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was a lot of violence on the highways across the country and here in Pennsylvania. So the National Guard and the state police were on patrol together. So you had members of both teams going up to this case to investigate it that night. I couldn't get up there because I couldn't get gas in my area until the next morning. So what happened was, here's this woman who lived in this little cabin home deep in the mountains of Fayette County, way up in the mountains, not afraid of anything pretty much. She just she lived it all her life, knew animals very well. She was sitting there one night as normal watching TV when she hears this noise on her little front porch of her cabin home. She had some empty pop cans out there. And somebody was knocking the pop cans around. So she figured, she thought, well, a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks before, she had a pack of wild dogs coming through. And she figured those dogs are probably back, so I'll just grab my shotgun, I'll fire over their head, and I'll scare those dogs away. So she goes over and she loads one chamber of her double-barrel shotgun. She walks over to the front door, hits the switch, steps out, turns on the porch light, and there's no dogs there, but only a few feet in front of her is this huge, at least 7.5 foot tall, hair-covered creature that puts its arms up straight up over its head the minute she turns the light on. And she never ever called this thing a Bigfoot. She said, I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, I look like a great big hairy ape. And what did she do? She fires right into it with her shotgun.
Oh my God.
She said,
wow.
There's a bright flash of light, like the flash on a camera, and the creature physically disappears right in front of her. But that's not the end of the story. So her in-laws lived about 100 feet away. They heard the gunshot, and they called her on the phone. They asked her what she's shooting at. She tried to explain it to them. So her son-in-law, he grabs a sidearm, his pistol. He starts walking down that dark lane towards her home, and he said he's surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with glowing, luminous eyes. He starts shooting at them, and he runs into the cabin home. And about the same time, they see this large luminous object. They said looked like a big Christmas ornament hovering over the trees at the same time.
Yep.
That's when they called the state police.
Wow.
So these fellas, I talked to the primary investigator, and he said by the time they found the place up there, he said everything was done, but he said something very, very strange had happened up there. That he based on the animal reactions, and that's something I have seen. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the show, but all the years I've been doing this now, going on 62 years, I have never personally seen a UFO Bigfoot myself. I've interviewed thousands of witnesses. I've seen a lot of evidence. I think I chased a Bigfoot one night in '73 in the dark through a cornfield, but I never saw it. I heard it. I recorded the sounds, but I never saw it. But anyhow, going back to that case, he said when he got up to the area, these people had a number of large dogs. There was other animals there. When they went there, everything was quiet. The dogs did not bark or make a sound. Very commonly, in many cases I've investigated, even the most ferocious dogs, when they're in the vicinity of many Bigfoot cases, they are like completely, they're completely still. They cower, they hide, they don't bark, they don't move. That's something that's very, very common. And even other animals react quite often like that. And I remember one of the trooper told me, he said there was one of the big dogs up there. I think it may have been the Eskimo Spitz, was in a cage, and the dog wouldn't move. And he opened the cage, and the dog, it should have ripped his arm off and wouldn't even make a sound.
What do you think that is?
When I got there, all the dogs were barking like normal. So that was the one case, among others, that strongly indicated we're dealing with something which is much, much stranger. And the more I look into this phenomena, I'm dealing again with these giant flying creature sightings, thunderbirds, the Black Panther sightings, which are very, very strange, continue to be reported in Pennsylvania year after year, out of place, and other phenomena. There may well be links between different creatures that I'm finding now.
Wow. Well, Stan, why do you think that the dogs don't make no sound? Are they just scared, or why would they do that?
Well, there's some reaction they have that they're either so frightened or they're able to sense something. It's very common, especially those on your panel there. I believe Sean is involved in the paranormal. Very typical for animals to be able to sense various type of paranormal phenomena as well. So they're more sensitive to certain frequencies, certain sounds. And I'm beginning to find more and more incidents that might show some connection as well with other types of the paranormal. In fact, the more I know about this phenomena, it may well be that a lot of these things are somehow interconnected. I can tell you that a lot of the UFO cases I've worked on, and again, not just lights in the sky. I've investigated multitudes of even daylight, low-level, large structured objects being seen, and there's more and more reports over the greater Pittsburgh area. And this might surprise you, but in the Pittsburgh area, there have been a lot of interesting cases that have gone on. And, we had one case years ago, back in 1986 in daylight, we had a report of a very large cigar-shaped object hovering right over top of the Monroeville Mall in daylight. We had a case in 1989 in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh at the intersection of Beacon and Whitman of a very large elongated object with lights on it that hovered right up over the intersection. The people made a police report on it. We had an incident in 1995, and these are just samples, at 2 o'clock in the morning, of people reporting a very large elliptical object with hundreds of lights on it hovering over the Homestead High-Level Bridge. And in 2016, in the afternoon, I had a businessman coming out of work in downtown Pittsburgh and seeing this object falling from the sky into the Mon River, and he got several seconds of very good video of this thing. And if you go back to my website, you can probably see a still from it. That's just a small example. And there have been many, many instances in the last few years all around the greater Pittsburgh area and other areas.
So is there an increase of them lately? Do you think they're connected?
We're not having anything like the 1973 outbreak, and it varies from year to year. Again, I receive reports of sightings every year, all year round, in all kind of weather conditions. This recent wave of activity was very interesting that happened in late February through March. And over the years, we have some short little cycles where there's more than normal activity. I can't say there's any major amount of activity. I will say that probably in the last 10 years or so, maybe a little more, I'm seeing again a little more in the increase in reports of what I call the classic UFO sightings. And these are cases where we're having reports of objects that are not high in the sky, but they're low to the ground.
Wow.
And some of these cases are very, very intriguing, very, very interesting. Let me just give you an example. June 1st, 2013, I believe it was. And this was on Route 30 in North Huntington. So I'm sure you all know where that is. Busy highway. And this person was riding down the road, with a 3-year-old child in the vehicle. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and they're coming out of a convenience store. And as he's riding down the road, and she's on a cell phone talking to a friend, she suddenly has to brake in the middle of the road. She said to me, I couldn't believe it. There's no cars near me. They're all way behind me or way ahead of me. She said, I had to brake in the middle of the road because here initially about 150 feet away, there's this very large object. She said it was a big, solid, metallic, rectangular object, but it looked like a gondola of a blimp without the blimp. And she said this thing was only hovering about 60 feet over the top of Route 30, taking up all 4 lanes of the highway. And she said that this thing was about 55 feet in length, about 35 to 40 feet high. And she said it was 2-tiered. The top section had 5 sets of green lights. There were 3 individual rectangular lights in each set. The 5 sets of lights were all evenly spaced in a vertical position, and the lights were all steady and were not blinking. The witness said the green color was brighter than the green of a traffic light. The bottom section was small in size, contained within 2 long solid red lights were placed side by side, and the lights were steady and never blinked. The person was on the phone. She was on her cell phone, and as she had to pass underneath the object, some very interesting electronic interference occurred. She noticed on the dash that the dash indicators for clock, temperature, like the airbag status, the radio she was listening to went off the air. She lost her cell phone signal. The FM radio she was listening to lost the signal. And she tried to take a picture with her iPhone. It would not let her go into the photo mode. As she moved down the road further, everything came back on normal. And by the way, her 3-year-old child, when he first saw it, he said, Mommy, flying iPad in the sky.
That's funny. Hey, Stan, real quick. I've been, it was Jenny. She introduced me to that missing 411. All those cases, do you believe it is UFO related?
Well, I've read some of David Paulides' book, and we talked about it, Dave and I, a while back. And it's very interesting. He's got a lot of really good data. As I told Dave, though, of the hundreds of Bigfoot sightings I've been involved with for years and years, and many other people who I know investigate cases in Pennsylvania, I've never seen that connection here of missing people connected with that. Have I investigated cases of alleged UFO abduction? Yes. I was probably one of the first in the country going back in the 60s and 70s investigating cases in Pennsylvania. But even though there were people who claimed that they thought they had been abducted, and some of these are very credible people, something happened to them. I can't say for sure they were abducted by extraterrestrials, but something happened to some of these people, but they all came back. But one thing I found by going back and looking into the background of some witnesses, it seems very possible that almost anybody can be in the right place at the right time and see a Bigfoot, for example, walk out in front of a car. We get a lot of reports like that. But there are other individuals, and there's many, many of these people out there. And many of these people are very credible. Some are very educated people from all walks of life. And I had a person call me just 2 days ago about this type of thing. And from the time they are young children, sometimes they've had missing time experiences, but they begin to have the various types of paranormal events from the time they're very young. Throughout their life, they've had encounters with UFOs and Bigfoot and the paranormal. And I have had indications from at least one case I worked on and others that it could be even hereditary, because the one person I've been in touch with for years and years who was missing for hours as a child and experienced throughout her life, and the other people were with her who experienced some of these cases as well. Now her children have had experiences, and now her grandchildren. So it could be this is something we're hearing about more and more, that it could be something else. And I think this is something that needs studied much better. But there's a lot of similarity, again, with what I'm investigating and people investigating with the paranormal.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, Stan, we got to wrap it up because our next show is coming on. We got a late start, so we have to wrap it up. So we're going to have to continue this another time. Hopefully, we'll be able to get it straightened out with your computer, and we'll be able to have a full hour. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and again, thanks for having patience with us. You have a great night. And thanks again for tuning in to Chasing Prophecy on the UPM Radio Network.